What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're back with more Destiny 2 news. Today is Thursday of course, so we get Bungie's weekly blog post and they continue the conversation about Edge of Fate in what has been a pretty busy week for details about the system changes coming to the game. So we'll cover more of that stuff today. Also they speak once again about changes to Prismatic, potential future subclasses, updates for the game which have gone live just now, and a few other things. So as always guys, if you enjoyed this one, a rating below really does help us on the channel. Otherwise though, now let's get into it. A few days ago, alongside the reveals for Edge of Fate, Bungie spoke about changes they have for prismatic fragments. They clarify some things and address some concerns with some additional changes here. So they say, during the hands-on preview for Edge of Fate, we shared an early look at prismatic tuning planned for the update, and this pass reduced the number of fragments that could be placed on various aspects, as we found that prismatic subclasses have been a bit hot since release. Certain prismatic builds have increased damage output and survivability to a point where challenges can feel trivial, and bringing everything else up to Prismatic's level wouldn't help to solve this in a healthy manner. And they go on to say, while we're still planning an overall tuning pass for Prismatic for a future date, featuring buffs alongside other changes, we will be changing the approach for Edge of Fate a bit in response to feedback. So aspects that were originally planned to be reduced to 1 fragment slot will remain at 2, and we feel this is a good middle ground, where some of the more potent aspects are being tuned down, but not too much. Of course, we'll be playtesting this change internally before Edge of Fate to make sure it's the right decision, but basically, Consecration, which currently has 3 fragments, will go down to 2. It was going to go to 1, but they've rolled back that change. Knockout remains at 2. Then Hunter's Stylish Executioner remains at 2, reverted from 1. Ascension goes from 3 down to 2. Winter Shroud also goes down to 2. Then on the Warlock, Feed the Void remains at 2, with Helion and Bleak Watcher going from 3 fragments down to 2. So still, effectively a nerf, but less of a nerf than what they were originally planning. Give us your thoughts about that. I guess it's really gonna depend how those elements will impact other changes like the stat tuning, set bonuses, or whatever else it may be. So we'll see it in context in the game. Further on the subject of abilities though, Tyson Green, the game director, reportedly said, "The red subclass isn't real. Maybe it'll be a thing someday. Red is definitely a color that we haven't used yet." That is of course definitely true, and obviously we're not seeing new subclass elements, as far as we understand it, in Edge of Fate. We'll get onto the TWID, discussing more of that in a moment. Otherwise though, just a heads up, D2 team have confirmed that the Make Good mementos for Salvation's Edge raid are now available, and qualifying players will receive an in-game message directing them to the Cryptarch to collect them. So if you think you're eligible for those, worth checking in. Otherwise, Bungie have also auto-completed the Court of Blades Augmentations challenge due to progress not registering when meeting the requirements, so a couple of minor updates there. Next up though, it's onto the TWID, and Bungie do offer a few answers to some common questions that we've had recently. Some of them we've already heard about. Will we get more vault space? They say vault space is not changing in Edge of Fate, but they do have additional vault space and quality of life features planned for Renegades, so we'll have to stay tuned for details on that. In terms of our current gear in Edge of Fate, Bungie say the current gear will still be very viable in the next expansion, and you'll surely use it in the near future when beginning the expansion, and even in contest mode for the World First race. At a high level, the new gear we introduce alongside gear tiering will offer new benefits once you start getting involved with certain activities. Armor will have spikier stats and total numbers, as well as specific archetypes that will help you put together stronger builds. Same thing with weapons. The higher the tier, the more extra perks and enhancing options you'll have. Otherwise, they'll give us more info in a future TWID, and a full livestream dedicated to talking about gear, so we'll have that to look forward to in a couple of weeks' time. Otherwise, they also reiterate they'll go into new weapon archetypes that are coming with the expansion in one of those new streams. And for the Director, they say they're currently focusing on the portal as the main hub for Edge of Fate, but the Director isn't going away, and players will still be able to access activities and locations through it, and Kepler can be accessed through the portal. I heard about that. Reportedly, Kepler won't actually appear on the destinations map, but will be featured on the portal, which is interesting. Otherwise, they say, what are unstable cores? Well, this is a new currency introduced with Edge of Fate. They'll be earned from dismantling high-level gear, among other sources, and they'll reset at the start of each 6-month season. We plan to answer all of your questions regarding the economy changes coming with Edge of Fate in a future TWID, but the unstable cores, as we've mentioned previously, will be used to upgrade gear that goes beyond power level 200, but instead will be part of a sort of seasonal rotation of currency that we'll be able to use for those upgrades. Otherwise, they touch on gear tiering and exotic armor 3.0. They say, during the reveal stream, the team spoke about adding depth to armor and gear in general with the launch of the expansion. As part of this, armor stats are getting an overhaul, and some new stats have been created to expand upon the build crafting opportunities. They say there are a literal mountain of changes to talk about over the next few weeks, and you'll definitely be seeing a few of us on upcoming live streams. But in terms of core stat changes, when we log into Edge of Fate, that mobility is now the weapon stat, resilience has been replaced with health, recovery is now class, strength is melee, discipline is grenade, and intellect is now super. For experienced players, of course, most of those are self-explanatory, and for health, they say it grants between 0 and 70 points of healing when picking up an orb of power, plus between 0 and 10% flinch resistance. That's at base, but of course we can move stats beyond 100 now, so between 100 and 200 on the health stat, shields will start recharging at between 0 and 25% more quickly, and take between 0 and 50% less time to fully recharge, and that will be based on exactly how high those stats actually are. For melee, between 1 and 100, it improves the base cooldown of the ability and the amount of melee energy gained from external sources and any melee regeneration speed scalers from other sources. Then between 100 and 200, we get between 0 and 30% increased melee ability damage, and that includes powered, unpowered, and glaive melees. So interesting that glaives are also built into that stat. On the grenade though, between 1 and 100, it improves the base cooldown of the ability and the amount of grenade energy gained from external sources and any grenade regeneration speed scalers from other sources. And for the higher tier of stats, we'll get between 0 and 65% increased grenade ability damage. Onto super though, between 1 and 100, it improves the super energy gained from damaging targets. It does not change the base cooldown time of your super, but it also improves the amount of super energy gained from external sources and any super regeneration speed scalers. Then the higher tier of stat will allow between 0 and 45% increased super ability damage. Then for class, it improves the base cooldown of the ability and the amount of class energy gained from external sources, with the higher tier granting between 0 and 40 health points of overshield, which is 0 to 10 in PvP on casting your class ability, and the duration is determined by the ability used. So, for example, dodge and thruster will last 5 seconds, and barricade and rift will last 10 seconds. They have of course also added the weapon stat, and at base it improves weapon reload and handling speeds, and damage versus minor and major combatants, going between 0 and 15% for primary and special, and 0 and 10% for heavy. Then the boosted stat, over 100, grants a chance for ammo bricks produced to contain more ammo than normal, and it improves damage versus boss combatants and guardians. Again, 0 to 15% for primary and special, and 0 to 10% for heavy, with the maximum outgoing increase against players at 6%. And otherwise, they say for stats going away with the new system, mobility will be fixed to what 30 once was for Titans and Warlocks, and 40 for Hunters. Additionally, there are new leg armor mods to adjust this higher, and resilience is fixed to what 100 once was, with recovery fixed to around what 60 once was. So, a few things to get our heads around there, really. They also point out that at low stat investments, abilities will be recharging slower than they used to, but at high investments, they'll recharge faster. So, we are going to want good rolls of these armor pieces, and any chunk energy gains, like Demolitionist type perks that provide a direct amount, and any energy recharge scalers, like Crown of Tempests, will also now be scaled by the stat investment. This will extend to exotic armor though. They say exotic armor 3.0 has now been factored in to better support the transition to the new armor system. So, with Edge of Fate, Bungie will be updating all drops of existing exotics to use the new armor 3.0 system, reducing the amount of time it will take to get armor with stats that we want. In addition, Ada will give reproducing exotic armor a try, and the supply may be limited, but most Guardians should be able to focus their choice of any previously acquired exotics with some influence over their stats. Otherwise, they say if you prefer to take your time and use the roles you have, they'll get the stat updates described above, but importantly, Ada's exotic focusing will only be available in the Year of Prophecy. Then for class items, they've said they'll be updating them directly with stats based on the perks they have on them. If you already have perk combinations you like, keep them, but if you're still hunting, feel free to visit the Pale Heart now to get ready for Edge of Fate. They also highlight Xur continues to bring exotic class items from time to time. Otherwise, once again, there'll be more details on all of these system changes in a future TWID. I mean, they already had a few answers for questions right there, but I feel like the future TWIDs they're referencing are going to have to be absolutely ridiculously meaty. There is one final section of the TWID though, which is good to know, and that refers to Adept weapons. So they say when Edge of Fate launches, Adept weapons will be going away in favor of the new tier gearing system. Before that happens, we want to be crystal clear on when you'll be able to earn Adept weapons from Trials and Nightfalls. So you can see that full calendar right there, Nightfalls at the top. That is the rotation remaining up until Edge of Fate, and likewise for Trials at the bottom. So if you want any of those weapons in their current Adept form, this is going to be the last times to actually grab them, and Adept weapons essentially aren't going to be a thing by the sounds of it. Instead, all rewards will be focused on tiers moving forward. So share your thoughts on that. For the moment though, outside of the other reveals and the more in-depth conversations and the live streams that Bungie are going to hold, that is the TWID for today. So good to get some extra clarity on some of those systems. Of course, a bunch of elements that we already knew about with a couple of clarifications. Either way, give us your thoughts. If you found the video helpful, a rating below really does help us out. I'm personally looking forward to Armor 3.0 in particular. Of course, there are separate conversations around the power grind, the tiering system, and whether we might get locked out of certain tiers of gear based on our power level. I'm sure more clarity will come on those subjects as well, but for the moment, share your thoughts, get subscribed for more Destiny content, and otherwise, I hope you guys have an awesome day.